Why do I keep showing up? Oh, thank you for hitting the record button, Mina. That's great. We're going to record. If you all don't want to be recorded, you can keep your video camera off. Are we going to record the breakouts too, Mina, or just the main session?
No, just the main session.
Yeah. So we'll just record the main session so that they're available for people, members of our community who weren't able to make this call today. These get posted up on our website so that you can see what's happened in the past and continue to join up. This is a space where people that are working on advancing climate equity by using data maps and working relationships between frontline BIPOC communities and local government can come together and share information, share resources, and help each other get better at this practice of advancing climate equity. So that's what we're doing here. Thanks for being with us. And today, we've got a session that's focused on the intersection between health and energy burden and racial equity. So what we're going to do today is we're going to Diamond Spratling, who you all met last month as our community practice manager, is going to present a recent report out of GreenLink Analytics. And then we're going to hear from Catherine Leaves with the Green and Healthy Homes Initiative, works out of Jackson, Mississippi, about some work that they do on this. And then we're going to take some time and we're going to go into some breakout rooms and we'll pull up the GEM mapping platform and data platform, and we'll get into that with you all sort of directing, like, what city do you want to look at? And let's walk through some of these indicators and what do they mean. So that's a plan for the next little bit. Any questions? You in the right place? All right, great. It's wonderful to have you with us. It's a participatory space, so feel free to use the chat and ask questions along the way, connect with your peers, share information. That's what we're here for. I'm going to turn it over now to Diamond Spratling, who's the GEM Community of Practice Program Manager, who joined us about a month ago, Diamond?
Yeah, about a month ago, two months ago, maybe.
It's been so wonderful to have you on board. Diamond's taken over the management of this community of practice as we go forward. So you'll be hearing more from her and less from Mia and Mina as we head on into the future. All right, Diamond, thanks. I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thanks so much for that great introduction. It's so nice to see so many lovely people on this call. So thanks you all so much for joining our community of practice. If you give me 1 second, I'll share my screen so that you can learn about our June GEM reports. All right, just give me a thumbs up to make sure you can see. Okay, perfect. Never know with Zoom, so I always want to make sure. All right, so for those of you who don't know, what we've been doing as part of GreenLink is actually producing these amazing reports monthly to talk about the intersection of GEM and really the work that you can do with GEM and using it for different things such as equity, energy burden, health, things like that. And so our June report that we put out about 2 months ago was called Hardly Coincidental, based on climate and health equity, specifically in Houston and Miami. So I'm going to do just an overview of that report, and hopefully you all will be inclined to review the whole report as well. So just to give you a little bit of background of what we're going to talk about. So definitely talk about the purpose and our overall reason for even producing reports like this and why we want to do it. We're going to get into some specific details about Houston and what's going on there, and then do the same thing for Miami too. And then we'll talk about what the trends are, what the findings are, what the similarities and differences are between both Houston and Miami, but also in your prospective cities too. And then we'll talk about the bigger picture, because that's really what it's all about. What is this contributing to equity and to our goal of living these better quality of lives? So let's get into the purpose. We all know there are tons of racial inequities and racial disparities that we see all across the country, but I think it's really important to be able to identify that a lot of these racial inequities come from seeing those greater impacts in climate change. So we know that with those disparities, we see certain groups, certain races are experiencing greater impacts of climate change now today, but also in the future as we think about how climate change is going to continue to impact us. In addition to that, Miami and Houston are actually two of the largest cities within the US where climate impacts or the impacts of climate are strongly going to affect low-income communities. And we've already seen that. We've already seen those impacts already. And so we know, just given the nature of climate change, we're going to continue to see those effects exacerbate over the years. And the other thing I just want to point out is also the importance of really making the connection between climate, health, and energy burden, and also systemic racism. It's very critical. They're all connected. And I see that that's one of the other big things that we want to be able to highlight within this report. So that's kind of the purpose and overall basis of creating this report, but also some of the other reports that we've created in the past and the ones that we're currently working on too in the next couple of months. So getting into the key findings. So there were tons of different key findings that we were able to find. So I'll go actually through some of the ones I thought that would be most important. So one of the first things is racial disparities. So we've seen in the report that neighborhoods experiencing the highest asthma rates in Miami and in Houston are exclusively majority people of color, but specifically Black populations, Black residents. So those are those racial disparities that we were able to pinpoint just from this report, but also seeing the data that we've seen within GEM, which we'll have the opportunity to explore in our breakout groups as well. The other thing that's really important to highlight are these economic disparities that we see. So differences in income levels across neighborhoods and on that census tract level. We saw that disparities in health and in energy burdens can be seen both across race and income, and specifically in Houston and in Miami, and I'm sure in other cities as well too across the nation. But also the high rates of insurance of uninsured people. And so thinking about half of the neighborhoods actually in Miami and in Houston have had the lowest rates of health insurance in the entire country. And that's a really big deal to not have insurance, especially when we think about the health outcomes and the exacerbation of climate change and how we start to see that in the future. And even just thinking about ER visits and the cost of an ER, or even the cost of taking an ambulance to the ER. That's another thing that the report talks about are those ER visits and the cost, especially for populations who are uninsured. And the other great key finding that I thought was really good to really note is this policy-driven action. So policy-driven investments, specifically in things like weatherization and energy efficiency, are actually capable of improving health and quality of life outcomes, but while keeping in mind that we're still able to reduce those energy burdens as well, because it's not just about the health piece, it's not just about the income piece, it's about the energy burden piece too, and how those different pieces intertwine with each other. So I do want to get a little bit into specifically what's going on in these two cities. So in Houston, there are actually over 150,000 people who are highly energy burdened. And these are low-income households who experience asthma rates that are above the citywide average of 8.6. So at an average across the city of Houston, the average asthma rates are about 8.6%, which we can see here as I'm toggling through this graph here. It's about at 8.6%. But we can see also that the average city median income is about, I would say, $62,000 per year. So those are the averages. But if we look down here in this little box, this little square here, we can see that there are tons of folks within Houston that have way higher rates of asthma. So we can see in some cases, there are areas where we're seeing 14% asthma rates, and this is almost double what that citywide average is. But another thing to note is that not only do they have asthma rates, we can see that the income levels are quite low here too. So these folks are below that average city median income of 62%. So we can see that there's clearly a correlation between income and also asthma rates for Houston. Another thing to note here is a lack of health insurance, because we know that that's also a great indicator to be able to look at, and we can actually view that through GEM as well for those who didn't know. And we can see for a lack of health insurance, it's about 30% for the average across the city. And then we can see as well, it's about 62% still average median income. But we still have these folks in this corner here within Houston who are well over this city average of lack of health insurance. There are areas where 60% of the population don't have health insurance. And we can see that that is closely correlated with the median income as well, and energy burden too. So another thing that we're seeing within this graph is that the lighter colors are lower energy burden communities, and the darker purple colors are the higher energy burden communities too. So we can see that not only there's a correlation between median income and asthma rates, we also see a correlation between who has the greatest energy burden. So that's Houston, but let's actually dig a little bit deeper. And so here we're able to see the differences between asthma rates specifically in the Black communities and communities that are predominantly have Black residents. So here, asthma rates are significantly higher in neighborhoods that are comprised of predominantly Black residents, as opposed to neighborhoods with predominantly white residents. And so we can see here in this map to the left, it's actually showing us, and let me move this toggle a little bit, it's actually showing us areas or neighborhoods where we see the worst adult asthma rates. So we can see they're down here where we see these dark color browns. We can see they're in the top right, this dark color, and a little bit in the top left as well. So that's what we can see as far as the asthma rates. But if we look over to the map over to the right, we can see the share of populations or of neighborhoods where majority Black residents live. And so those are those dark green colors too. And if you just look from left to right, you can see it's kind of the same pattern here too. We can see pretty similar colors as far as where we see the darker colors too. And so just as we just saw, we can see that the neighborhoods that have high asthma rates are also the neighborhoods that have higher Black populations. But let's actually transition a little bit over to Miami, where we see similar instances as well. So Miami's low-income neighborhoods actually experience the worst asthma rates and a pronounced lack of health insurance. So we can do the same thing we just did in Houston, and we can see that in Miami, the city average is about, I'd say maybe $42,000 or $45,000 for the median income. That's the city average. And we can see the city average here is about 8.2, 8.6 as well. But we can see that there are tons of folks within Miami that, one, have higher asthma rates, and two, make less money, have lower income median income each year. We can also see that these are the same folks that have the highest energy burden. So we can see again that those three different indicators are all closely correlated within each other. But we can move on and see the lack of health insurance too. We have that same similar situation when we're looking at city health insurance average being about 35% as an average. And then we see the income again is about 42,000 to 45,000. But if we look down in this bottom right little box here, we can see that this is the area where we see high energy burden, we see lower income, and we see high lack of health insurance. So those three indicators clearly seeing that there's some relationship here. So let's dig deeper here in Miami. So areas that have where the asthma rates are the highest, and the highest within Miami is actually at about 12.7%. Those are also the neighborhoods where we see predominantly Black residents. So we can do the same thing that we just did for Houston, where we can cross-reference and see, okay, where are the areas that have high asthma and where are the areas that have predominantly Black residents too. And so this map to the left, we see the dark brown that's showing the asthma rates again. It's pretty severe over here in this area, and we see some severity over here in this bottom area as well. And if we just cross-reference with our eyes, we can see those are the same areas where we have dark shaded greens, indicating that this is also a high Black residence area as well. So we can see that race is also an indicator, and it has a relationship to where we're seeing the highest asthma rates. So let's just close off with what the bigger picture is. I think there are tons of things that we can take away from this analysis, and especially just digging deeper into that Jim report once y'all read it. And so the first thing I think that's really important is to understand that it's important that we are looking at these equitable practices. We see the data, we know the data, we have access to great tools like Jim. So it's up to us to be able to use those tools within our practices, our organizations, our city structures, and making sure that we're holding ourselves accountable to actually understanding that data and doing something about it in order to mitigate these issues. The other thing that I think is important is that idea of this is all intersectional, this idea of health, climate, energy burden, they're all intertwined, and we can't advocate for one without the other because they're all contingent on each other. Just as we saw in the maps that I just showed, we can see where we have low health insurance, we also have high energy burden, we're seeing high asthma rates. So it's important for when we're working on these issues that we're working together and we're connecting and understanding that when we're working on one issue, whether it's public health or science or environment, we're going to be working towards the greater goal of intersecting all of the topics. And the last thing here, I think it's just critical to bring up is the idea of collaborations. I mean, that's the idea of this community of practice, is to be able to bring our city leaders and to bring our community-based organizations together to build those relationships, to advocate for mitigating environmental issues and mitigating those health issues that we see too. So I think bringing both of the sectors together is very important, but even cross-departmental collaborations as well. So it's not just about the urban planning department or the sustainability department, it's about bringing them together and figuring out the best way and the best equitable strategy in order to help mitigate those issues. So that's the bigger picture here. And now that you've gotten a very quick overview of the report, I would highly encourage everyone, if you can, to go through and read through the report. I promise it's a very easy read. It's not long at all, and it's definitely worth reading and sharing with your colleagues. And I'm sure Mina's going to drop the report in the chat too. And with that, I'd love to open the floor for any discussions, any questions. But I had two questions here too, just right off the bat, just wanting to know from your perspectives, how do these issues come up in your city? Have you seen the same type of issues? Have they been different? What are your thoughts, just having had an overview of the report, if you've seen anything come up in your city? And feel free to write in chat, but also feel free to just unmute yourself as well.
This is June in Charlotte, North Carolina with Clean Air NC. I'm so grateful to the work that you're doing on this issue. And we do see it in Charlotte when we do presentations on environmental justice. We usually put 3 maps together. One is the redlining map. One is the health department's priority areas for public health. And then we put the poverty areas. And it's, you know, it's so clear when you put those visuals together how connected it is, you know, to institutionalized racism and how that's impacting the lives of people today. So it is a really clear picture. I think for us, we are interested in trying to green some of these neighborhoods to mitigate the impacts of air pollution and climate change. So strategic tree planting and those kinds of things. But this is very useful, and that's just a different way that we use our maps here in Charlotte to show the same message.
Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing, June. That's great. Any other thoughts?
I have a thought. This is Jasmine with Groundwork Denver in Denver, Colorado. It's a nonprofit. We also do a lot of work with like red line maps and have also noticed increased asthma levels, but that's mainly because we have a lot of industry. So we have a oil refinery that's super outdated, and we've been trying to shut it down for so long, but no one's, the state's is just saying, well, that's our only oil refinery, so we can't shut it down, even though it's terribly outdated. and it's polluting the air and water and soil. And the area in northern Denver is just historically incredible. Like, it has a legacy of pollution from past industries. So it's no surprise that there are such high asthma rates in the area, and that it's primarily like a BIPOC community as well. We haven't looked into like energy burden numbers, nor like number of how many people are uninsured. But yeah, I was just wondering, in the case study of like Houston and Miami, I know Houston in particular has a lot of like oil refineries as well. But like, what is nearby that it's causing all of these like high asthma rates in these case studies?
Thank you so much, Jasmine, for sharing. I think that that's a really great point. Just thinking about what those external factors are, or what's near the environment where we've seen these disproportionate impacts of energy burden. Thanks so much for sharing. I think, I don't know if we have time for one more, or we can definitely, okay, we have time for one more. Great. Any other comments or just thoughts?
This is Stacy in Minneapolis, and really just appreciate all this good work and looking forward to seeing how we can apply it in Minneapolis. And I liked the nudge to be intentional about collaborating, thinking about reaching out to our state health department, for instance, where they have good data, and combining it with the GEM data that's available.
Yeah, thank you so much, Stacy, for sharing. It's amazing. Awesome. Well, without further ado, I would love to actually transition over to our amazing speaker, Catherine Lee from Green and Healthy Homes Initiative. She's going to be talking with us about all of the really great work that she's doing and that they're doing over there, and also connecting health into climate. So without further ado, I will pass it on to Catherine Lee. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Diamond. I really appreciate that. And I'm going to share my screen. All right. Can everyone see that? Okay. All right, good deal. Well, yeah, I was just really thrilled to join this group and participate in this conversation. And I'm going to share just information about work that the Green and Healthy Homes Initiative does as a national organization, but also work that I'm working on. I live and work in Jackson, Mississippi, and have some projects that this audience in particular would be interested in. So the Green and Healthy Homes Initiative is an organization that is dedicated to addressing the social determinants of health and advancing racial and health equity through the creation of healthy, safe, and energy efficient housing. We actually started and still our primary offices in Baltimore as an organization called the Coalition to End Childhood Lead Poisoning. So our work is very grounded in lead poisoning prevention, but as we moved forward in the work that we were doing, found a real need to align more programs and services to take a holistic approach to housing, health, safety, and energy efficiency. And the reason for that is really the numbers that you see here in front of you, that because we have not been addressing these housing quality issues where people are most vulnerable because of the social determinants of health around their housing quality. You know, we're spending over $100 billion a year to treat people who are sick because they're living in housing that is not safe for them to occupy. And that is measurable, and those outcomes are measurable because of the impact, long-term impact of lead poisoning. When a child is lead poisoned, could potentially suffer lifelong effects of that. All of the issues related to asthma and respiratory health, including missed days of school and work, and energy inefficiencies also factor into that as well, and energy cost burdens all align to create unsustainable circumstances for a lot of families. So in response to that, the GHHI model was created and expanded in adoption through the work of our organization to align limited programs that were focused on specific kind of housing repair needs So we could take a more comprehensive approach to addressing all of the issues that families are facing in trying to address in their housing conditions, but also making that process easier, because so many families who are in need of services just have to end up spending an inordinate amount of time applying for services, going through income verification. And it's an extreme time and cost burden for families to have to go through these inefficient systems to get what they need. So that's a big part of our align, braid, and coordinate model, is making that efficient and yielding more results for families, but also the organizations that are providing these services. And overall, just having a more efficient system that is allowing us to invest more in communities that have gone through these legacy impacts of redlining and all the things that we've talked about already. So as our work expanded, and what we'll talk about a little bit more today is, we started to see that many of the communities where we were working were really starting to experience issues related to natural disasters and climate change at increasing rates, from flooding to fires to tornadoes. I mean, there's just such a combination, and seeing that the risk and showing that this severity of natural disaster risk by state where we were working really started to recognize that we needed to do more to incorporate ideas around building housing as helping support building resilience in communities moving forward. So that's something that we really have started to work into incorporation into that holistic model. Again, it just in response to what communities where we were working were facing and dealing with, and also the fact that part of that funding puzzle increasingly is disaster recovery funding. So, what we have started to recognize is that, these extreme weather events are increasing in frequency and intensity. We know that in the communities where we're working, those are the most vulnerable to disasters and have the highest, face the highest burdens for recovery when natural disasters occur. And we know that through, in mapping tools, the social vulnerability index and other kind of support systems for doing those measurements. But, we know that through healthy housing programs and retrofitting, we have opportunities to increase resiliency so we can help support those frontline communities. So we're working to try, working with local communities to figure out how to do that. And just wanted to share a little bit about, how we can make this connection of extreme weather and weather impacts to health impacts. So these are some of the bigger kind of pockets of things that we can track and what we want to address in any of our intervention strategies, dealing with potential injuries, causes of injuries and accidents, the mental health impact and stress that people go through in times of disaster, controlling vector-borne diseases and illness, helping support people dealing with increasing in temperatures. Again, if homes are already inefficient and there are increasing instances of extreme heat and cold in communities, we know that we need to do more with weatherization and energy retrofitting to support communities and enable them to participate in those weatherization communities through healthy homes interventions, so that extreme heat won't impact them as much. And of course, as we've talked about with asthma already in Diamond's presentation, dealing with improving indoor air quality by controlling things inside the home, but also properly sealing homes so that external air that people are getting through their ventilation, it's not exposing them to air pollutants and smoke. So here are some components of how we can kind of break that down in work that we can do through GHHI's work, as well as the work of our partners in the disaster cycle, through preparation to recovery. There are a lot of opportunities, of course, in preparation to talk about these vulnerability assessments, map out areas that we know are going to be particularly vulnerable, and then think through how we can support communities to build resilience, but also get ready for response if necessary. In early post-disaster, really prioritizing quick and efficient assessment practices for housing needs, and also making sure that people are protected from exposure to environmental risks that are in that immediate post-disaster environment. And then in the recovery phase, thinking through how we can build sustainability and resilience in homes, and doing that in a way that, in my opinion, I think I've had several conversations about this recently of thinking through how we can improve, housing health, inside the envelope, but also connect that to other flooding mitigation practices, green infrastructure, the things that we can do at the neighborhood level, to increase that resilience in the long term. So our whole house strategy with a retrofitting component, can, in practice again, bring together these different efforts for home assessment and modification. And just want to highlight that a big part of the work that GHHI does is to try to support workforce capacity building to make this happen in practice. So people who are from the communities where we're targeting this work have opportunities to get certified and credentialed to provide services from housing assessments, energy auditing, to the retrofitting work being performed, and quality control evaluation, and all of those things that are necessary to make this work happen. So this is just again reiterating the points of emphasis for vulnerability recognition, and this is something that a lot of active housing programs can do, through CDBG funding and other kind of regular housing programs, is thinking through what we can do today already, and this is just an example of some of the kind of, I don't want to say low-hanging fruit necessarily, but maybe some low-cost and effective strategies, from smoke and carbon monoxide detectors to water pipe insulation, working with families to make sure they know how to do emergency shutoffs of their utilities, and things like that can really help immediately with responding to this in any community. So the last few minutes, I'll just share a little bit about some work that we've been doing in the state of Mississippi. GHHI came into work in Jackson in 2012. I've been working with the organization here since 2015. And what we started doing is that development of implementation for that GHHI model I've been talking about, and aligning the existing resources for housing repair programs supported through the city of Jackson, their sub-grantee nonprofit partners, and also our weatherization assistance program. Locally, it's through a community action agency. And then helping the city of Jackson secure resources for lead poisoning prevention so they could implement their Lead Safe Jackson housing program. So through a coordinated intake process and coordinated assessment process, we're able to bring together these various streams of funding to bring that into housing repair work happening in the city of Jackson. So I am proud to say that we've been successful in making that work, and now that we're starting to get out of our COVID lockdown protocols, we'll be able to start actually doing assessments very soon again, thankfully, in Jackson. But our work has expanded in the state of Mississippi since that time to do more health policy assessments for health impacts of the housing work that's going on. So that's something that we've been working on really for the last few years, but very intensely over the last 11 months or so. So we could get more assessments of what priority issues, communities across the state were facing when thinking through what are the, biggest concerns of health impacts of housing where people are living and working now. And, so through these assessments, I'm just going to share a couple of slides, and then we'll go into discussion and Q&A, obviously, about this. But from across the state, asking people, what they saw as the biggest issues and what they were most concerned about in their homes. It's a lot of energy efficiency issues with bills seeming really high, no big surprise, and knowing that there's a lot of air leakage from windows and doors, and opportunities for weatherization. And that, that's creating issues with moisture control in homes, along with other things, but also recognizing issues in the same households of chipping and peeling paint and lack of safety prices. But that's also connected to issues of neighborhood and community safety and quality concerns, where people, and this is, I think, common everywhere, that when you ask about what are the kind of biggest neighborhood quality problems, people are concerned about litter and just overall the beautification needs for neighborhoods, but seeing very consistently concerns about increased amounts of flooding and heavy rain and frequency of natural disasters, but also things like grocery stores being too far away, safety concerns, and then again, utility services not meeting community needs. So we've been, again, collecting this through surveying and doing some focus group conversations. And this is what we're trying to come up with policy solutions for right now in the state of Mississippi is how do we help support families who are living in unsafe conditions, but when they look for help from either the property owner or community service providers not knowing what to do. So this is a picture of a rental unit that was occupied by a family who they were trying to figure out what to do to deal with this mold issue in their apartment. Reached out to the landlord. The landlord did not respond or do any repair work. They stopped paying rent and had to go through an eviction process. So how do we break that cycle so we aren't immediately failing the people who are living in these conditions, but also preventing people from moving into rental units that are unsafe, and holding landlords accountable to make sure that they're making repairs and they are operating and managing housing in a way that's healthy and safe and efficient for their families, so they're more affordable. So we are working with those communities throughout the state of Mississippi to come up with public and private sector strategies to address these issues. And we've come up with some priority policy recommendations as a result of all the efforts across all these communities, which has been a wonderful experience. But I think the challenge and one of the biggest priorities that we're facing right now is we're seeing more federal funding coming into communities through the American Rescue Plan, more funding allocations from the Department of Housing and Urban Development for healthy homes and lead poisoning prevention programs currently. What can we do to make sure that we're setting up programs so they can successfully align and address these issues holistically, and those resources are getting to the communities that really need them, which is always a challenge when we're talking about competitive grants in Mississippi and a lot of the frontline communities where we're working. So I'll stop there. These are just some common programs that we work with to try to allocate funding to healthy and efficient housing service needs. But I will just stop and say thank you for letting me join you today. And I would love to hear any questions or comments that you all may have.
Wow, thank you so much, Catherine. So much great, amazing information in such a short amount of time. Thank you so much. I'd love to ask if anyone has any questions, feel free to, you can write them in the chat or voice them verbally too.
Okay, this is June again from Charlotte. So what a lot of the funding came from the city community action agency. Does Jackson have a history of those different departments coming together? We talked about the whole intersectionality of these issues, and I think that's where a lot of us in our cities, we need to look and see, what are you talking to each other? I know I always ask that at the state level. But did Jackson have a history of that? Or if not, how did you bring them together? Was it easy, hard, any challenges there, and any tips you can give to the rest of us?
Absolutely. And I think that's a really important thing to highlight, June. Thank you. So, I would say the easiest part, it's always challenging, is or where we started, I'll say, with the City of Jackson and their Office of Housing and Community Development, was to align the programs they were managing in-house to begin with, from their CDBG and home fund allocations to their other repair programs, including the Lead Safe Jackson program. So just making sure that the active things just under the City of Jackson's roof had a common intake process and application, and that people, who were applying for veteran services and other kind of special pockets of funding, were all being considered for these same needs. the more you try to expand it out, the more challenging it gets. And one of the biggest challenges I think that we could all agree on is the fact that these housing repair programs through HUD have one definition of what it means to be low income, and weatherization and the Department of Energy have a whole other set of, and it's the same people, but we have to define it in different ways. So it is a challenge. And you know, the weatherization assistance program has an online application portal that they have to use, you know, so people, you know, it's imperfect in what we're trying to implement, but we do the most that we can for alignment. And, you know, just have to, you know, support and work with families to help get them through those more challenging parts of coordination. But, you know, the thing that I think really helps is thinking about the coordination of not only the intake processes for the city services, but also how the housing inspectors and assessors that are going through and doing unit inspections and then coming up with a scope of work, making sure all of that is enabled so they can you know, identify what kind of repair work they're doing with what funding, and that, you know, all of that can be tracked, in the people who are doing the repair work that they're contracting, you know, also have a streamlined process. So that's a lot of what GHHI does, is that kind of technical assistance to get into the meat of how that can happen. But, you know, overall, you know, we've seen a lot of success with it in a lot of cities, you know, but it takes ongoing support for coordination to really, to keep it going, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, thank you again so much, Catherine. Just absolutely amazing, helpful information. And if anyone else has any other great questions for Catherine, I'm sure if we're able to put your email in the chat and we can have folks reach out to you directly, I think that would be a really great opportunity also.
Thank you so much, Diamond. I appreciate that.
Of course. Thank you so much for joining us. All right, so with that, I mean, I would love to actually transition over to our breakout sessions. Oh, thanks for putting that in the chat. To our breakout sessions where we can actually have the opportunity to go into our GEM platform and see how we can actually go through and evaluate and visualize the different health indicators that we have in GEM, and look at health insurance, and also look at energy burden. So we're going to actually have Mina split us up into groups so that we can go ahead and visualize GEM. Hold tight for those
a short amount of time. Always a short amount of time. We'll hand it back to Diamond to wrap up. But if anybody, it was nice to be with some Portland peeps, and I'll put my email in the chat here. So if anybody wants to talk more about Portland or talk about access to the GEM map, yeah, feel free to hit me up. Sorry, Diamond.
No problem. I'm glad everyone was having some great conversations there. So that's nothing to apologize about at all. But I just would like to wrap up and thank you all for joining our community of practice. Just a few updates. If you ever want to schedule a demo, if you ever want to schedule office hours, you can do that directly with me. Mina's going to put the book online link here, and I usually have them on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So I'm happy to walk through GEM with anyone. The other thing to note is our next community of practice call is going to be next month, September 10th, and we're going to be talking all about climate equity indices. So that is super important and super exciting to be able to talk about. So please make sure you join us. You can register right there in the link. The other thing is that if you want access to GEM, which I'm hoping everyone does after those amazing demos, is that you can easily sign up through our website. Mina's putting the link in the chat right now. So for those of you who'd like to sign up who haven't already, please feel free. I invite you to do so. And I think those are all the updates I have on my end. Jeremy, Mina, anything else? No? All right.
So. Thank you so much. And great to see all y'all. I'm just trying to make sure I promise to get my email in the chat. There it is. So hit me up if you need that.
All right. Thank you all so much.
Thanks, everybody.
All
Thank
right.
you. Hope to see you
Take
next
care.
time.
Workshop.
right, thanks for
Bye.
being with us today. Have a great day. We'll see you next month.
Bye.
Hey, can I have a few more seconds before you end so I can click on these links?
Yeah,
For
yeah,
sure.
we'll leave it open. for just a
Okay.
minute.
Sorry, I'm kind of behind the eight
No,
ball.
good call, Knowledge. Thanks for that. We're kind of rushing here at the end.
Yeah.
Okay, one.
Jill. Mina, thanks for putting me in a room with our cool Portland peoples.
For sure. There was a bunch of Portland people in my room accidentally. So I was like, oh, I'm going to send you over to
Oh,
Jeremy.
really? Oh, okay.
Yeah, they didn't have it in their names, but I
Mm.
shoved them over towards you.
Okay, good. I hope I have a chance to connect more with them later.
Awesome.
Okay, I'm almost done, y'all.
Take
Yeah,
your time.
Oh, yeah. Totally
Oh,
fine.
good. Knowledge is a Portland person too. Knowledge and I have coffee later today. I'm not going to that.
Awesome.
But
I Knowledge, I haven't met you yet, but I recognized your name from Desiree and Jeremy's calendars. So I was like, I think that's a Portland person.
Yep, you're absolutely right.
Portland via
Awesome.
Pittsburgh, via, elsewhere in the world. Yeah.
Yeah, Jeremy, that's one of the things I wanted to do is show you these interviews.
Oh, yeah, excellent. That's cool.
Jeremy, I'm gonna make you the host because I gotta hop off and start something
yeah.
else.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's good.
All right.
All right, I was
Bye,
staying
Mina.
here for just a minute.
Well, thanks so much, y'all. Bye.
All right,
Bye.
nice to meet you.
You too.
Bye.
Yeah, let us know when you've got what you need.
Yeah, I got what I need. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Okay,
Mhm.
you're welcome.
Awesome.
How about you, Jonah? You good? You still there? Maybe just left the screen open. Okay, we'll go ahead and end the call then. But yeah, nice to be with you all today. Thanks for being in here. And Jonah,
Diamond,
Yeah. Bye.
great job.
Thank you so much. It's so nice to meet you.
Likewise. Sorry, Jeremy, I cut you off.
No, I was talking to Jonah. I'm not sure if she's there. I was just saying thanks for sharing in our group. She was sharing her lived experience and how it related to the data and the maps, which is really,
Oh,
that's what we're about. Yeah.
her
Awesome.
name is pronounced Jonna.
Jonna, oh, thank you.
Mhm.
Appreciate that.
No problem.
So cool.
All right.
All right, catch y'all soon.
Talk
Talk
soon.
soon. Have a great weekend.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.